Uh, First of all, I joined the chapter in 1971, shortly after I moved here. So I missed being a charter member by about a year. But needless to say, all the charter members were members at that time. So that's how I got to know them all. So the program is put together chronologically, and I'm going to attempt to show some of the changes that have occurred in the past 30, 40 odd years, starting in 1979. But before we do that, I'd like to show you what the Kansas City Southern looks like. So this is KCM of Mexico down here. This was trackage that was purchased in order to reach KCM of Mexico. And the original Kansas City Southern is what you see here. Okay. And this was the Gateway Western, and they purchased it to get into St. Louis. And this is the Meridian Speedway. And we'll focus on this stretch of track here, a few images here and a few down here. Okay, so with that, let's get started. I will point out that I may not identify a lot of places, but they all are identified up in this area here. And this photo was taken in 1979. My wife and I had attended, she as just my significant other, a conference, professional society meeting in New Orleans, and got this just as, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And so the first thing I'd like to point out here is the white paint scheme. And this paint scheme was adopted in 1966. By the time I first photographed down there, it was pretty well universal. I don't think I ever saw a red unit. This is in Gramercy, Louisiana. Okay, so we'll start now in 1980. I was out in Kansas City for a meeting. Meeting was Monday and Tuesday. I got there. We had a dinner Sunday night, so I got there early. I had a few hours on my own, so I went rail fanning. The north end of Kansas City Southern was in Kansas City at a place called Knoche Yard, or the Joint Agency. And it was also where the Milwaukee came into Kansas City, hence the Joint Agency. And here we have a switcher working the yard from the north end. These were pretty common when I got there, but they had been replaced, and they are now pretty well gone, all the end cab switchers. Now, the Kansas City Southern has a long grade from the Kansas City River front trackage at Knoche Yard to Grandview. And I knew about some of this, so I went exploring and caught this coal train. You'll note the BN power on the front. This is probably Powder River Basin coal. And BN power was fairly common on coal trains. Anyhow, there are two bridges that are of concrete construction, and I managed to find both of them. The previous picture was taken from this bridge over here. And here is the other concrete bridge, and that's the same coal train, I think, that I showed you from the two images ago. And then they have a long steel viaduct. And we're looking at the west side of the bridge in this picture. And later on, we'll look at the east side. And here's that same train arriving in Grandview. Another view, different train in Grandview. And then in 1981, I can't even tell you why I was down in Louisiana again, but here we have another train at a place called Metairie. And one of the things that's interesting about this train is I believe this is not an operating F unit. I believe it's a slug. They did turn some of their F units into slugs. Back to Kansas City. I think the reason I included this is because I really like transfer cabooses. And, you know, so here we have one. And there'll be a couple of other pictures with transfer cabooses in it. And this is not at Canoka Yard, but this is south of the station. And they shared this yard, or they met in this yard with the Katy. And the switches on the right showed two different Katy paint schemes. The old one was red, and the newer contemporary one, and the last one Katy had, was the green and yellow. Moving ahead to 1982, 3 nicely rain-washed transfer cabooses.
Bob, are those black tanks hold oil for a stove or something? Is that...
I don't know what they hold, but I'm sure they're for a stove, because you can see a smokestack on them. It may be they hold propane and not oil.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Moving further along in 1987, I was down in Mena, Arkansas, and this rail grinder came through, and you can see down here some sparks. And I had a friend in St. Louis at the time, in St. Charles, working for ACF. And I, once a year or twice a year, had business in Rolla, Missouri. And if I had to go to Rolla, I would fly out on Friday evening, and he and I would spend Saturday and Sunday rail fanning, and then I would drive down to Rolla early Monday morning. Now, one of the railroads that crossed the Kansas City Southern was the DeQueen and Eastern, and it was part of a 3 railroad grouping like Chessie System was. One of the other ones was the Texas, Oklahoma, and Eastern, and I can't remember the third one. And this is the engine facility at the Queen. We were there on a weekend. Nobody was there. You could go wherever you wanted. If you went there today, there'd be a big chain link fence and you couldn't get in. And we have here, it looks like a Jeep 38 and a Jeep 40. Pittsburgh was the main shops at this time for Kansas City Southern. It was also a crew change point. And there was a bridge north of the shop, and it provided a very nice place to stand and photograph trains. Now, I understand in later years, some people got ran off the bridge by police when they were taking pictures, but back in 1987, there was no problem. And I think this is a south, yeah, it's got to be a southbound coal train because coal loads go south here. And here's another one with a BN unit leading. And then meeting northbound merchandise. KCS did have some modern power. Here here are a pair of SD50s. Okay, moving forward to 1991. In 1988, the Kansas City Southern decided, and you'll see why in a little bit, that the white paint scheme just got dirty too fast. So they switched to a gray body with red lettering and yellow nose stripes. And we here at Decatur, Arkansas. So here we are at Noel, Missouri, and you can see there are, you know, a reasonable number of units that are painted gray already, and you'll see some more in a minute or two. But you're getting mixtures of power, and the lead units are, at least the lead unit here is an SD60. And here we have a couple of SD60s meeting each other. Also in Noel. Noel is a pretty neat place. And here's 50s meeting 60s. And I took these pictures in 1991 when I was working for a month in Rolla. And one weekend, a friend of mine, a different friend from St. Louis, came down, and we drove down here, and the 1991 pictures are what we got on that trip. In 1991, I got my first view of Oakway units down there. And we saw part of this train before, or all of it. Moving further south, we're at a place called Lanigan. We have a southbound coal loads with white helpers and a southbound grainer with white helpers. Anderson was a really neat place to photograph. I had other photographs here, but chose just this one, again, to highlight the gray paint scheme with the SD60, which at that time was their most modern power. And this is another coal train in the area. We saw this coal train up in Noel a few images ago.
Are the EMD units there because they're demonstrating for the railroad, or
No,
because
those
the
are
railroad needs?
those are Oakway units. BN had 100 of them, and they were leasers, power by the hour. So EMD, through a subsidiary called Oakway, leased the units, and BN paid for the power times the time that the units were operating. Did I make that clear?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the top of McElhaney Hill, which is a fairly significant grade here. And we're going to go north now. Again at McElhaney. And you can see here that they had problems with the fading of the KCS, but you'll see how dirty they could get in a few minutes. And so here we are in Neosho. Neosho is the foot of the grade up McElhaney Hill. This is local power. The B unit is a slug. Probably the Jeep 40 is the mother, but I won't swear to that. And we saw this train at the top of the hill. few minutes ago with an SD50 leading, again in the Osho.
Why isn't it child instead of slug?
I'm sorry?
I'm just kidding. The term slug always makes me laugh. I wonder, you said the mother, I presume you mean the one with the crew in it, and yet the other one is called slug, and never mind.
Yeah, I don't know where the term came from, but it does have it does not have a prime mover. Okay, so another view in the Osho. And then moving up to Joplin, I've only photographed in Joplin once. The interesting thing here was, this is where the old Joplin station was. And I think it was a Union station, and you can see where the platforms were. And I guess this is where trackage was. And you're beginning to get some idea of how dirty these units got. And we did get a meet in Joplin, and note that the grain train has a pure set of gray units, but there's a slight difference in the gray. And then moving further north, a place called Asbury in Missouri. And this is an overview of Knoche Yard in Kansas City. Two interesting things here: UP coal train and a slug mother set here. But I think this is an SW1000 or SW1500. So it's a newer end cab switcher. It's a 1500. And by the way, excuse me, you can tell the difference. 1500s, 2 stacks, 1000s, 1 stack. This is up near the engine facility. Couple of SD60s, all gray. Couple of more SD60s. But still some white around, as we saw earlier. Okay, moving forward to 2007, 2008, Doug Kuntz and I made a trip down here, hoping to find Bell, retro Bell units. The paint scheme actually came in 2007. And by 2008, there were a few around. So we'll now work north from Shreveport, Louisiana, which is where we started our trip. And by this time, Kansas City Southern had gotten the concession on the east coast of Mexico, formed a company, TFM, and this unit obviously is a TFM unit. Norfolk Southern units were not unheard of, obviously, but they were rare. Didn't see them that much. And here's another shot at the same place, Jordan Street. With a TFM, you get a better look at it, and KCS. And by the way, that building as of last April was still there.
Bob, with
Yes.
The Mexican units, the instructions in the cabs are bilingual.
Oh, okay.
I've
That
been-
doesn't surprise me because you see a lot of them up here, used to.
Yeah, I've been in a couple of run-throughs.
Then we went north of the yard and saw our first retro bell. Unfortunately, it didn't come very far out of the yard for us. But a couple of SW 1500s running together is pretty neat, especially today. And I'm not sure what these are. They could be SD70 Max, but they were on a rail train in Shreveport. And I saw Doug Kuntz is in the audience. If I make mistakes, Doug, please correct me. All right. There's a really nice bridge at a place called Mooringsport, Louisiana. And we managed to catch one train there in the pouring rain. You can see down here how, but this gives you some idea of how dirty these units could get. And Mooringsport had some very nice places. This is a pretty hodgepodge group of locomotives. Probably the most interesting one, and I don't know why it was here, is this one, which is what I think is an Ohio Central paint scheme. And now we're on the other side of the bridge at Mooringsport. One unit on a long grain train of brand new black KCS hoppers. And somebody, when I showed some pictures of these a while ago on Facebook, not Facebook, Flickr, somebody commented that these have been, a lot of them have been repainted. And here's the same train at a place called Bloomberg, Texas. And the locomotive is an SD70 ACE. And I kind of like telephotos, and I like images where the locomotive is really big and, as I describe it, in your face. So you'll see a few of those.
You have any idea, Bob, what the cost of one of those brand new hoppers is today?
No, I have no idea. I'm sorry. Okay. We've gotten now to Texarkana. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this could be an NS unit because it looks like the NS primer paint. And we found a really interesting place in Texarkana. This is UP, and this is UP. One of them is former Missouri Pacific, and I'm not sure what the other one was. I knew at the time, but I don't remember now. And we caught two trains here, this guy and this guy.
Could it be Frisco?
You know, you could tell me anything and I'd probably.
I don't know, but Frisco is in that territory.
Yeah, I'm looking at a rail atlas and that might
actually-
be Frisco, yeah.
Actually, I don't think so. I think it's Cotton Belt. The more I think about it, the more I think it's Cotton Belt. One of these is more Missouri Pacific, and I would bet the other one's Cotton Belt because Cotton Belt was big in Texarkana. Okay, we're now in Ashdown, and BNSF has come along, and so now we'll see BNSF power on some coal trains. And it is crossing the Kiamichi Railroad. Now, this is the Kiamichi is a former Frisco main line, and it was purchased in 1987 by Rail America. And we actually found or stumbled upon some Kiamichi power here. And I believe Rail America also owned the Indiana and Ohio, which is how come this unit migrated down here. It became part of Rail America in 2002, and the Genesee and Wyoming bought Rail America in 2012. So when we were in Ashdown a few months ago, that's what we saw. And he's coming off the Kiamichi and going down to interchange with KCS. KCS line is in the foreground.
Where's Kiamichi?
The actual place called Kiamichi?
Or is it a place or somebody's name?
I think it's a place, and I'm just saying I think it's west of here, but
Okay.
I won't swear to that. I mean, you know, the best way to find out is to Google Kiamichi or Kiamichi Railroad and see where it goes. I did that, but I don't remember, frankly. And so here we have two coal trains. The one with the Grinstein Green unit leading on the left is loads, and the one with the 9157 on the right is empties, and 9157 and mate are DPUs. And BNSF power was really prevalent down there. Now at a place called Gillum. And again, I'm pretty sure the gray unit is NS, but I can't understand why NS would be down here. And here they're passing the DPUs on another coal train, probably empties. And I'd always wanted to shoot the depot in Mina, and I got a chance to do that on this trip. Now, a few miles north of Mina, the grade over Richmond Hill starts. And there's very little access on the south side. Matter of fact, the only place where there's access that I know of is a place called Eagleton. And this is a train of empties heading north. And here we have coal loads coming south on the north side, the north grade, approaching Summit.
If you have the new book by Kevin U. Daly, this Eagleton was his favorite spot on the road.
Really? I don't have it yet.
It's good.
And we found a way to walk into the tracks a little bit up from a place called Page, which we'll see in a minute. We caught a few trains here, including this guy coming down grade. Now Page has a siding, so it's a place where there sometimes will store trains waiting for crews, and sometimes they'll have a meet. And the train on the right is waiting for a crew.
Well, I didn't know Oklahoma had that much green. Wow.
Well, you know, this is the Washita Mountains. It's, I mean, you know. Now here's another train at Page. And this guy is coming south, getting ready to climb the grade. And as you can see, we did see a lot of retro bells. And the nice thing about them is the paint was really brand new. Okay, so now we're going further north, place called Stapp. And I put this in because of this unit here. And this unit here became part of TFM, and it is in the final Mexican National Railways paint scheme. The railroad at that time was called Nacional de Mexico. And we'll get a better look at it in a few minutes, in a minute or two. Place called Hodgen. And this is the same train, and there you get a better look at the paint scheme. And then we found a reflection shot. And we're just getting real close to Heavener right now. Coming into Heavener. Now, there was a short line that ran out of Heavener called the Kansas and Oklahoma. And we just ran down there a ways until we found the engines parked. They weren't running. Got a couple of roster shots and went back to Heavener and continued. Now, Heavener was a crew change point and a fueling point. And they had 2 tracks, and they had 2 fuel pads, one between the tracks on the north side of a road, which is where I'm standing, and one between the tracks on the south side of the road. So they could fuel 4 trains here at a time. But they could not fuel if they had a DPU, they couldn't fuel the DPU. So they would fuel that from a truck. North of Heavener, maybe about 3-4 miles or so, was a place called Forest Hill. I know it says Heavener on the slide, but that's a place called Forest Hill. And Doug and I found a really nice curve shot up there. We were really pleased with this. And looking the other way, we got a photograph of one of the locals that operates out of Heavener. This one was coming from Fort Smith, and locals here are called Dodgers. So this is the Fort Smith Dodger. And we also caught a grain train with 3 SD40s. Continuing further north, about 10 miles from Heavener, is Howe. And this is probably the same train we've seen twice before. Here you get a broadside view of the Nacionales de Mexico paint scheme. This is the former Rock Island Choctaw route. And here's a connection over to KCS. And up to this point, the Choctaw route going all the way west to Oklahoma City is owned by the Arkansas and Oklahoma. Unfortunately, there is still a chunk in the middle that they don't operate. It's under their control, but they don't operate it. And they have a Rock Island derived paint scheme that is really nice. Continuing north, Doug and I went to a place called Spiro, and then went north of Spiro over some really mucky dirt roads to find the south end of the bridge over the Arkansas River. This is not an easy place to get to. We had to work a little bit. And there's also, and I'll show you some images in a little bit, some interesting places to shoot just south of the bridge. But right now, I'm gonna finish up with some shots that Doug and I got first on the Meridian Speedway and then south of Shreveport. And so here we have a train that is, I think, westbound on the Speedway. Now, a lot of the money that went into rebuilding the Speedway came from Norfolk Southern. So they run, KCS's connection on the east end for through traffic is Norfolk Southern, and you see a lot of Norfolk Southern power here. And here we are at a place called Gippsland. Gippsland was really an interesting place and may still be. This train is westbound with NS Power. And what was interesting about Gippsland, you have a crossing back here. That is the Louisiana Northwest, which runs down from McNeil, Arkansas, and terminates here. Okay. And the track continues beyond here, south, and there was another railroad called the North Louisiana Gulf. And we got an eastbound train there too. And here you can see the crossing and the connection track. And the prior picture was taken from this bridge back here. And one thing that's interesting here is this is now interlocked. Okay. And here you see the Louisiana Northwest Power in 2008 and a passing KCS train. And they have some, reasonably modern power, GP40 on the left and a rebuilt Jeep on the right. Now, there was a time back in 1987 when there was no interlocking here. There was a gate. And the crew on the Louisiana Northwest would probably call the dispatcher and get permission to swing the gate across the KCS, or what was then the Mid-South, across the Mid-South main line. And so here you see Louisiana Northwest meeting Mid-South. And this friend of mine from St. Louis and I came down here one day and chased the train from McNeil, and it had a Jeep and an F unit. Unfortunately, the FRA had said no more F units on the point if you're going to do a lot of switching. So we had the Jeep on the point. Now, the Louisiana Northwest was incorporated in 1889 and became part of Patriot Rail in 2008. The Mid-South, huh?
Oh, sorry. I see a locomotive there. When did I see disappear?
IC disappeared much later than this, but I'm just about to tell you what that trackage is that Mid-South is on, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so that was a former Illinois Central, and I almost has to be a former GM&O line across here. And the Illinois Central Gulf got rid of it in 1986 and sold it to Mid-South. And Kansas City Southern bought it from Mid-South, and I didn't put the date down here. But this was a very exciting 45 minutes because within 45 minutes, we had two Mid-South trains, the Louisiana Northwest and the North Louisiana Gulf in town. And here's the Mid-South guy, one of the two Mid-South guys working. And here's the other Mid-South guy.
Yeah,
This was the east-west.
yeah, the east-west line was originally Illinois Central, not Juvenile.
Oh, was it? Okay, thank you. And here's the North Louisiana Gulf coming into town. Now, this was originally chartered in 1906 and was a lumber company subsidiary. And it acquired 15-mile section from the Louisiana Northwest south of here to let it reach Gippsland, and went into Mid-South in 1987 And Mid-South, okay, went into KCS in 1994. So the branch south of here is owned by KCS from everything I could see, but I don't think it's operated by KCS, and I'll show you why in a bit. And here was the power that came into town. MP 15s, yeah. So now we're in Gippsland in 2008. And here comes the North Louisiana Gulf. And it's a mixed bag of paint schemes, but this unit is in a Watco paint scheme, WATCO. Now, this unit and the trailing unit are in paint scheme of a company called Iron Road Railroads, and they own the Bangor and Aroostook and I think the Delaware and Hudson and a bunch of other things up in northern New England. And I'm pretty sure these locomotives are down here because they were purchased. And here you get a better view. Okay, now we're moving down south of New Orleans. A meet. Man on the ground is waving to the 3921 crew, which makes me think it's the 7017 that's waiting and the 3921 that's sitting, rather passing. And here it goes. And we drove south trying to chase this guy, and we did, as you can see, successfully. And there was this little dirt road into private property. And I said, we can't go in there to Doug. And Doug said, oh, yes, we can. So we did. And the final photo of the trip was, again, a meet in a little town called Drury, Texas, which I don't even think is on the map. Okay, fast forward to 2011. This time I'm with a friend, Dale Dicont. Dale was a CSX engineer with over 42 years with CSX and its predecessors. He drove out to Kansas City. I flew out. He picked me up at the airport. Northbound train from the east side of that big viaduct I showed you much earlier. And now we'll head south. Again, even more retro bells. Another place that's not on the map, Okaloosa, Missouri. And again, we see a lot of BNSF power on coal trains. Now we're back in the Osho. Train's getting ready to head up the hill. And he got to the top of the hill, and we beat him up there handily. And there was another train in a siding leading to some kind of grain facility. And so we got the road train passing the stop parked 4109. We've now moved down into Oklahoma. And this is the station at Stillwell. I would have liked to have gotten a KCS train here, but this is what came along. I would even been satisfied with a coal train just as long as the KCS power led. And we found a way to the north end of the bridge over the Arkansas River. The previous shots were down in this area. And we were able to drive right in here, although I've looked at Google Maps and I can't figure out how we did it. And now we're back at Howe. That's the connection track from the Arkansas and Oklahoma here. And back at Forest Hill. for the grain train. And then climbing Rich Mountain. And this is a train coming down Rich Mountain at Eagleton again. Okay, I was back there in 2014 with Bill Kalkman, Dale Dicont, and Stan Short. We caught this guy at a bridge we found at a place called Sulphur Springs, Arkansas. And so we'll work our way north from here. One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting, and the one reason the shot's in here, is seeing a UP locomotive on a grain train. In Gentry, Arkansas, there was an overpass which gave us an opportunity to shoot a couple of trains before we continued north. And here we have a mixed manifest with a DPU. And then a grainer. And then we stopped again at Forest Hill. And here I put this in because CSX power down here was pretty rare. I have a few other images with CSX power, and the other thing, to see CSX, UP, and KCS on a northbound hopper train is also pretty rare. And last of all, in 2014 already, some of the earlier units are beginning to fade. But it was still a nice paint scheme. And this is a place called Zoe, or Zoe. I really like the Aces. And we even found our way back there on the next trip, which was a few months ago. And so here we are, 2022. I would say we spent about 4.5 hours here, although the times on my images don't bear that out. But I would say that's what we did. If I'm wrong, Bill, you tell me.
I think it was about 5.5.
Okay. But this is a trip I made with Bill and Jim Kleeman and a guy by the name of Fred Eisen. And we really, 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 all of us wanted a train coming east across this bridge. And in 5.5 hours, this was the only train that crossed the bridge, and it couldn't even have the DPU facing the right way.
Looks like Vicksburg finally changed its flag there, I see.
Okay. We're back in Ashdown. This SD40 was doing local work. Since the local power, the older power, was the last to be painted, it looked the best. That's all I can say. This is a bridge at a place called Rodessa, crossing Black Bayou. It's a really nice shot, and you just stand on the highway and shoot it. And even as late as a few months ago, there were some gray ones running around, but they certainly look pretty grim.
You're talking about fading paint, Bob. I guess because of these, locomotives are out all the time. It's oil-based paint, isn't it? I know that. I realize that fades, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can tell you that some paint has done better than other. Not here particularly, but if you look at BNSF paint, some of the paint held up very well and some of it didn't. And also the GE units that Santa Fe got, the paint didn't hold up real well, not near as well as the paint from EMD.
Yeah, oil-based paint is generally tougher, yeah.
And, you know, this was really a sad sight right back here. But here again, if you look back here, there's an EMD and here's a GE, and this one just looks tired. That's the best way I can.
The middle unit looks like it got left sitting under something.
Yeah, and they never cleaned it. We followed the back roads north, and we knew this train was coming soon. We didn't know how soon. It didn't take very long. And we found this bridge, wooden bridge. So we set up for a shot crossing the wooden bridge. And this is coal empties heading north. And this is actually a DPU on what may be an ethanol or an oil train. But once again, I mean, you know, it just, they're not quite as bright and shiny as they were. We kind of like this spot because of these tractors that we use for grass cutting. Here we're once again climbing southbound up Rich Mountain. And here we have a meet at Page. And coming into Heavener. And you can see, you know, even this unit, which isn't, well, I guess it could be 15 years old, was looking faded. One of the things that we stumbled on in Heavener, much to our surprise, and which we were very pleased to find, was this veterans unit. We didn't chase it very far, maybe well, they stopped, that's right, they stopped to fuel, so it wasn't very far we could go.
Reminds us of the bicentennial units from 50
Yep.
years ago.
And I was just very glad 5011 was leading here because the trailing units, both of them, are pretty sad. And we came upon this coal train, coal empties, sitting at a place called Call Junction. And I was just wandering around, and I didn't have my telephoto lens. So I took this at 135 millimeters, but it was on a crop frame camera. And then I did some cropping in Photoshop. We spent a night in Pittsburgh and got up the next morning and started heading north. And in finding our way out of town, we made a wrong turn and stumbled on this. This is the South Kansas and Oklahoma, and they have a unit honoring Pittsburgh State University. Whoops, sorry. Continuing north, at a little town called Eve, we encountered the Missouri and North Arkansas. This is the former Missouri Pacific White River line. And in December 13th, 1992, it went to Rail America, and then to Green Bay and Western. I'm sorry, in 92, it went to Railtex, and then to Rail America in 2000 when they bought Railtex, and then to Genesee and Wyoming in 2013 when G&W bought Rail America. That's another thing that is not very common down there, to see a mixture of UP and BN engines on a coal train. And finally, a portent of things to come here in Heavener. KCS, and Canadian Pacific. Thank you very much.